How should we do audio? Are you doing your headphones or?
Yeah, he joins audio.
So welcome everyone to this very special edition of U Ottawa Innovates. My name is Jacques Beauvais, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Ottawa. Today's panel of our esteemed guests is going to discuss the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion in research and innovation. Thank you to all our panelists for joining us today and to everyone joining us online to take part in this very important conversation. Whenever we do gather for an important event like this, it's our custom to offer an Indigenous affirmation in support of reconciliation. We pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their longstanding relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We pay respect to all Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers, both young and old, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future. I'm so very happy to introduce today's moderator, Michelle Liu, who is not only a PhD candidate in civil engineering at the University of Ottawa, but a full-time JD candidate in the Faculty of Law, Common Law section, making her the first person at the University of Ottawa to pursue both degrees concurrently. And in addition to her most impressive resume, she's also a Vanier Scholar and the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation Scholar. We're very lucky to have her with us today to share her insights and knowledge. And please join me in welcoming Michelle to the virtual floor. Michelle.
Thank you, Dean Beauvais, for the kind words and for grounding today's discussion in truth and reconciliation. If innovation is the act of changing something established, then we cannot truly innovate until we acknowledge the establishment, the legacy of colonialism. So as researchers, scientists, leaders, and innovators, our duty toward truth and reconciliation is unquestionable. My name is Michelle Liu. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a professional engineer in Ontario, and as you've heard, a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Engineering here at the University of Ottawa. My research interest lies in how engineering standards and professional norms can better consider equity, diversity, and inclusion principles. Today, I have the honor of moderating a discussion on the theme of EDI in research and innovation. I'm joined by panelists Dr. Catherine Mavropoulos, Dr. Mamadou Fall, and Kathy McCallion. Dr. Catherine Mavropoulos is a professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Ottawa, where she works on advanced numerical methods for aerodynamic simulations. From 2011 to 2021, Dr. Mavropoulos held the NSERC Chair for Women in Science and Engineering, a program that aims to recruit, retain, and advance women to leadership. She has been the president of the Computational Fluid Dynamics Society of Canada and sat on the council of the Canadian Aeronautics and Space Institute. She is a Fellow of Engineers Canada and the Canadian Academy of Engineering. Dr. Mamadou Fall is currently a professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Ottawa and the director of the Ottawa Carleton Institute for Environmental Engineering. He graduated from the Earth Science Institute at the University of Dakar with an award of excellence for Best Graduating Engineer. He was awarded a PhD Excellence Scholarship for his PhD studies in geotechnical engineering at the Freiburg University of Mining and Technology in Germany. He was then granted a postdoctoral fellowship from the German Research Foundation and coordinated the German Research Chair of Environmental Geosciences and Geotechnics. In 2006, Dr. Fall joined the Department of Civil Engineering here at the university, of which he is now chair. He has been leading several major research projects that are related to mine waste management, underground disposal of nuclear wastes, carbon sequestration, and engineered landfill technology. Kathy McCallion is the Stakeholder and Community Relations Director at Ross Video. She is responsible for the development, activation, and deployment of Ross Video's employment branding and recruitment marketing strategy. A key aspect of this role is outreach, development, and fostering of relationships with government, post-secondary institutions, as well as corporate and community partners. Kathy has worked in the recruitment industry for over 20 years. She co-owned a local technical consulting firm until it was sold in 2014. Throughout her career, Kathy has worked with an array of technology companies in Ottawa, both established and startups, as well as crown corporations and federal government departments. Kathy's passion is driving meaningful partnerships between educators, community leaders, and industry. Welcome to Catherine, Mamadou, and Kathy I look forward to your remarks today. Namadou, I believe you have some additional remarks to provide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle, for your very comprehensive introduction. I'm always pleased if I see people who believe in EDI or try to implement EDI. And I believe that the innovation in research or innovation in education, EDI has to be considered. I have been involved in implementing or working with respect to EDI for many years. Has started since I was a PhD student in Germany. I was quite involved in many student organizations, try to help international students to integrate better, to succeed in their education and particularly in research. And even when I moved to Canada, I was first in the northern part of Quebec and Rwanda. I was involved also in regional organization, try to promote EDI, the integration, particularly from immigrants from Africa, from Europe, from Asia. That is something very important, was very important at the university. And moving here to Ottawa, I have been involved also promoting and implementing EDI because I believe it's very important. And particularly when I was appointed as the chair of the civil engineering department, one of the first decisions I made is to create and implement the EDI coordinators. What does that mean? We need to lead, someone who will lead and try to understand how well we are doing with respect to EDI, what are the weaknesses, how we can improve. I think you need to have some person that can do it and that can help us to implement. And why it is very important in my vision, because we know that there are many number of studies that show in research, in education, if you consider EDI, you will have higher creativities, better performance, and also the student will feel welcoming, better retention of the student, and that also support excellence in education as well as in research. Therefore, promoting, supporting EDI is the benefit for everyone. That is something I have been doing also at national level, as in my role as VP Technical of Canadian Geotechnical Society. We have many underrepresented groups that you need also to support at national level so that they can succeed in their education as well as in EDI. Therefore, today I'm very pleased to have this panel where people will share knowledge, where people will share their perspective, and where we can discuss. I think that will benefit the whole university and also the whole department.
Thank you, Mamadou, for contextualizing our discussion today in research and education. Now, as a warm-up exercise, let's scope or define the words equity, diversity, and inclusion so that they're more than just sound bites for today's discussion. I want to invite everybody in the audience to use your mobile device, a phone, an iPad, to share a little bit on what do you think of when you see or hear the words equity, diversity, and inclusion? What do these words mean to you, and what work are they supposed to do? And for those who have not used Menti before, it's completely anonymous and only takes a moment to navigate to. And you can do so following the instructions on the top there, menti.com, and entering that code. You can also navigate to the page using the link in the chat. So again, that's menti.com 2492-6864. We're just brainstorming some ways to define or scope the words equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'll give it a minute or so. So I'm seeing a lot of fairness, some support, reconciliation, cultures, accommodation, innovation, of course, different strengths, neurodiversity. Okay, fairness seems to be a a recurring theme. And so Menti does this neat thing where recurring phrases or words become larger and larger and are centered in the diagram. So we see here that fairness, accessibility, support, hope are some of the key themes. Okay, so fairness continues to be centered, opportunity is coming up, support, hope. Okay, so thank you to all those who have participated. Thank you to all those who have paused texting and emails for a minute to participate in the exercise. So the point of the exercise really was really to show how broad and divergent the purposes and meanings of these words can be. And the purposes and meaning of however you choose to use EDI in your work bears defining. And here we offer our definitions for today for both the panelists and audience to keep in mind as our discussions unfold. Equity is the principle of considering people's unique experiences in differing situations and ensuring that they have access to the resources and opportunities that are necessary for them to attain just outcomes. Diversity is the presence of a wide range of human qualities and attributes within a group, organization, or society. Inclusion involves proactively removing barriers in an environment such that each person can feel welcomed, respected, engaged, valued, and reach their full potential. So these are definitions for us to bear in mind as both panelists and audience as we pursue our discussion today. So let's springboard from the exercise and these definitions to a high-level question. How do you work with the concepts of equity, diversity, and inclusion? How do these tools enhance your work? And I'll give Kathy the floor first. Kathy?
Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here today. We're constantly looking to improve the tools that we have at our disposal, right, to ensure that we are attracting a diverse group of individuals to our organization. Ross does business in over 100 countries around the world, and our clients come from a multitude of different cultures. They speak on numerous different languages and have tremendous differences in backgrounds. And as a family-owned organization, Ross really started off, and there was no diversity really when the company began. But as we grow, the diversity of our organization increases tremendously. It is still and is of course still our goal to reach gender parity as well. We look at different ways to attract those individuals to the organization, and one of the key steps that we have taken is bringing an individual on board who actually drives ED&I programs. We know that will make a tremendous difference to our outcomes, and we look forward to seeing those progress.
Thank you, Kathy. Mamadou, did you want to add to the question?
Hello?
Did you want to add anything to the question of how do you work with the concepts of equity, diversity, and inclusion? How do these tools enhance your work?
To me, equity, diversity, inclusion is very important from different aspects. If I take my research group, always I try to have a very diverse research group, people from different backgrounds, whether it's from racial background or gender, as well as sexual orientation. The first benefit you are going to see in this approach, you will have better innovation in your research, because you will have people that may have different perspective, how they do things. If you are doing research, this is something very important we need to consider. And second, also having just a diverse group is not enough. You need also to make sure that they feel welcome, they feel also included, what we call the inclusion. The inclusion is very important. Now, I try to take many aspects to help them to feel welcome in my research group, like providing them training. It's very important that everyone understand what is equity, diversity, inclusion, because the understanding may be different depending which experience the people may have in their life, but providing them training will help them a lot. Now, once you have also give them the opportunity, another thing also that is very important, I'm trying also to practice in my work group, the mentorship is very important, particularly underrepresented group. They need also to have a mentor that can help them to progress in their education as well as in the research. But having doing that for many years, I only see many positive after considering EDI in research as well as education.
Catherine, anything to add there?
Well, my colleagues have said a lot of what I would have said, so thank you very much for inviting me, first of all. But I agree that innovation requires diversity. Especially being in the education business, I think we have to consider equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're here to make sure everybody who wants to learn can learn. I was wondering if we could make a poll of how many engineers have heard from their professors, look right, look left. In a couple of years, some of you won't be here. Only one of you will be here, which I think is a terrible statement. My attitude when I come to the classroom is everybody has an equal chance, right? So we're here to learn and we're here to teach you. So I think equity is quite important in the classroom. In terms of research, as well as Mamadou said, it's important for innovation to get to diverse ideas. When we get like-minded people together, especially in design and innovation, they tend to circle around the same ideas, whereas somebody comes completely from the outside, they have very different ideas. I can think of a few examples. We had a women's startup network here a few years ago for women entrepreneurs, and the types of products or technologies that the women chose to work on were nothing, nothing like the mainstream of what we see in a classroom. Often coming out of a need, a personal need from their family or somebody they observed. And for instance, one student who worked on developing a biofeedback device for urinary incontinence for women. And that's, a topic we don't talk about in a classroom full of guys often. So it really does bring out new ideas for research and innovation.
Yeah, and just following up on that, Catherine, you've been the NSERC chair for women in science and engineering for an entire decade. How would you describe science and engineering's consideration of equity, diversity, and inclusion principles? And we know that, increasing the presence of women, as we've said, is only a small piece of the broader change necessary. We need equitable policies, inclusive spaces that will retain these women. And women are not the only underrepresented group in science and engineering, right? What about disabled, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, and other equity-seeking groups? What do you think, Catherine?
Yeah, my passion had been for women for a long time. It doesn't mean it excludes anybody else, right? So I'm glad to see that the discussion is broadening, nationally and internationally to equity, diversity, inclusion beyond just gender parity or gender enlargement. I wouldn't say parity because that's going to take a long time. I think most of you probably know that Engineers Canada set up, I think it was in 2016, the 30 by 30 initiative to get 30% of newly licensed engineers to be women by 2030. Well, we're getting there, close to that date, and the numbers are moving slowly, but not as fast perhaps as we'd want. But things have changed a lot. There's many outreach activities for people of all types to learn about STEM. That has been a major change, I'd say, over my career. There was almost nothing in the beginning, and in the 90s, something started, and in the 2000s and 2010, it started to really explode. And now there's just so many activities going on. So the work has changed as we've gone along. A lot of people looked at the different leaks in what we used to call the leaky pipeline model, that, people would drop out at certain points, like middle school, high school, entrance to post-secondary, graduate, et cetera. So a lot has been done in all of those areas. I think that a major push now is to include more Indigenous people in our enterprise. And I understand Dr. Fall has quite a few activities in his department related to that. So maybe that's a next conversation piece.
That's right, Mamadou. I know the Department of Civil Engineering has a special initiative relating to Indigenous infrastructure. Did you want to speak to that or add your thoughts?
Yeah, that will be pleased. I think it's more at the Faculty of Engineering, what we call the Center for Indigenous Community Infrastructure. Why it's important, try to identify what is the need of the Indigenous community. And this center has a coordinator. A coordinator also is from the Indigenous community. And how to connect the university or education with the Indigenous community. There are many issues we are trying to address to work with the Indigenous community, like water is a big issue in many Indigenous communities. Building energy efficiency, civil engineer structure also is a big issue in those communities. Wastewater, housing, construction, renewable energy, and climate change. And that's to give just an example, the center has just obtained a 1 million grant from TD to support address issue related to climate change in Indigenous community. And the issue has been identified by Indigenous community. And in this grant also, Indigenous people will be hired also to develop some solution to address some issue that the Indigenous community are dealing with. I think here is a very good example how we can connect the community as well as the research and education we are doing here at the university or in the Faculty of Engineering.
Thank you, Catherine and Mamadou. What about you, Kathy? Having been a recruiter for almost 2 decades, what is your insight on this question from the industry perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, there's many ways that we can to partner to increase diversity within our employee bases and achieve gender equity. One of the areas, I mean, we've touched on it already, but I think really honestly, getting into the schools, being in front of younger students at the secondary and elementary school level really can make a difference. Young women need to see mentors, need to see themselves in place of STEM within the STEM industry. And one of the initiatives that we have at Ross is getting out and being in front of younger students, teaching them about engineering, getting them excited about careers in STEM, with the hopes in that they go into high school and they take the appropriate courses to move forward, right, and to continue on a career or trajectory into STEM careers. At the university level, I think it's really important to continue to mentor, be in front of those students, have candid conversations, let them know what it's like to have a career from a woman's perspective in STEM, and then continue to mentor individuals as they come into the workforce. Another way that we can ensure a diversity is by getting involved with our international students. And I'm proud to say that we've had some great involvement with UOttawa's International Student Club, their professional development club. And we've offered quite a few internships, and I'm happy to say that we'll be hiring one of those students in May. So it's a really great way of reaching out to students, making sure that individuals that do come to learn at UOttawa and other institutes in Canada are engaged in experiential learning, and then they continue to stay because of that experiential learning. They choose to stay in Canada and are offered opportunities. With regards to underrepresented talent pools, I think we really have to start thinking about accessibility barriers and making sure that we bring down those barriers. What tools do we have available to help individuals who have different challenges and abilities? With regards to supporting our Indigenous communities, again, outreach and building trust with those Indigenous communities is so important. Ross works with the Eastern Ontario United Way And that makes, we sit on a round table, and through that organization, we are developing relationships with Indigenous communities.
Thanks, Kathy. And speaking of mentorship and experiential learning, I want to turn to Mamadou again for a moment. So Mamadou, as a promoter and implementer of equitable policies and inclusive spaces, including through mentorship, both at the University of Ottawa and at the national level, as you've spoken a little bit about, what are the challenges and obstacles that you have encountered, both as a researcher and in your role as department chair?
I'll join.
A comment, a challenge, I would say, whenever you are promoting EDI or trying to implement EDI, you will face also some resistance from different groups. Some people may not believe in EDI. They think that it's not something very important. Now, it's just to make sure how to address those groups. Some people, you may face also some resistance from opponent. They are against EDI. That is something also I face many times in my career. You may also face some people who think there is no issue related to EDI, everything is perfect. That is a common challenge. That just to give one example, I was the evaluator of one civil engineering program here in Canada. I will not say the name of the school. It's a very good school. In Ontario, every program has to be evaluated every 8 years, regardless undergraduate or graduate program. And the evaluator usually are professors from Canadian University. And we were two professors, one female from the West and myself, and we have to evaluate this program. Now, to evaluate this program, you have to meet, you will meet with the dean, the chair, staff, and professor. Now, when we met the professor, we discussed about many issues, asked questions about the program, asked questions about research, asked questions about facilities, and we asked questions about EDI. One person jumped, oh, everything is perfect here. We have no problem with EDI, we are doing great. Just to provide this answer is incorrect. There is no place that is perfect. There is still room for improvement. But during the meeting, we noticed that female faculty member, young faculty, don't talk. They kept quiet. After we request to have a meeting with the female faculty member. But when we met with them, the history, they told us something else. And one of the female faculty members said, I was thinking of leaving. Why? Because he said, my office is in the old building, in the 4th floor. And the 4th floor, there are 2 types of washrooms. One washroom for professor and one washroom for staff. And the washroom for staff is divided into female and male. What does it mean that she, as professor, she has to go to the staff washroom? There was no washroom for female professor. Why? Because the building was built 50 years ago. At that time, people think it's engineering, it's only for men. But no one think about it, that something is wrong here. We only find out when we meet with the female faculty member, and when we meet with the dean and the chair, we discuss those issues, but they were shocked. See how people sometimes may think that everything is perfect, but in reality, it's not perfect. Promoting EDI, you will face many obstacles. And I think just trying, as I mentioned, the education for me is one of the best ways to address people who are opponent to EDI or people who believe that EDI is not important, it's just something nice to do. The education is the critical. Even in the underrepresented group, you may think some people, they may think that it's not important to work in EDI because they don't believe that change may happen. It's always to tell them that change will happen. Change is slow, but believe and promote it, and with time you will see change will happen, and everyone will benefit from those changes.
Having to go to a different floor or a whole different building altogether just to use the washroom is a familiar experience to many of us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Catherine, you're both diversity practitioners as well. Do you have any challenges or obstacles that you want to share? go to Catherine first. Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I tend to not focus on barriers or challenges. I just focus on what I can do. I told my team when I started the chair that we're just going to do positive stuff. So there's lots you could do. There's so many areas where we can innovate, make new activities, new training, all sorts of stuff. I do have people who tell me what I was doing is discriminatory to actually try to enlarge the pool, which is kind of a funny comment. I think mainly it comes from a lot of people have fear that they're going to lose something that they already have. They're going to lose some privilege, and they don't see it as privilege. They see it as what they deserve. Like you often hear people say, that woman took my job or something. It's like, was it your job to start with? Not necessarily. So people don't own a job, right? So one way that started some movements, in particular for advancing women in STEM, was to convince scientists and engineers with data, because that's the one thing they do believe in. And so data was one of the approaches, I'd say in around late 1990s, 2000s, is to bring data to scientists who hopefully will believe the data. Now typical engineers, they always question the data and they even question, social science research practices, as they don't see them as rigorous as their own. But that is one way to try to change people's minds, or as Mamadou said, to tell them a story, to tell stories that are real stories and try to put people, let them imagine what it would be like for them in a similar situation. One really creative way to do this was through theater. There was a University of Michigan, a Center for Research and Learning and Teaching theater group who would enact situations that had been recounted to them where it was, some unfair or discriminatory situation in faculty meetings and other university happenings. And that was a very powerful way, because you had actors who had nothing to do with our fields reenacting with such exactitude the situations we find ourselves in. And that was, it was less the people who felt like they were in the majority group, they didn't feel like they were being attacked personally. They just were faced with the situation and could recognize it. So that was quite powerful. And then recently, here in September, we had a one-woman play by Joya DeCary, who was an MIT math PhD student, and she's become an actress. And very powerful again, she did it with humor. That always helps. Humor. One of my best colleagues, Elizabeth Croft, who's the provost of the University of Victoria, always uses the humor. And I think that's a good way to approach it to help people understand why we need a change.
go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah. I tend to agree with Catherine that we don't necessarily concentrate on the barriers, but we really look to move the yardstick every single day. And Ross is not perfect by any means, and I don't think that any organization can claim to be. I think you have to really look at constant improvement. Without diversity and gender balance, we truly miss out on the opportunity to innovate and learn. And so at Ross, we've created working groups that are made up of individuals with diverse backgrounds, culturally diverse, gender diversity. And that's always the point of those groups is to bring those different perspectives forward, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And every one person has a different situation. What we learned from these groups, just to give an example, is we were looking at ways of improving the lives of our female employees, and we know that women carry a disproportionate amount of caregiving duties. And so what we looked at is, okay, well, what can we do as an organization to help improve the situation of our, for our our female employees. And so what we did was we extended our leave programs, and we looked at, maternity, paternity, and adoption leave. We looked at compassionate leave. We looked at caregiver leave for individuals who are taking care of family members who are ill and dying. And so those working groups really kind of, they give you that perspective, and then you can then move forward with programs that can aid and assist those individuals. And so as we move forward with our programming with regards to ED&I, those perspectives are going to be so important in shaping our programs and what we do moving forward.
Thank you all. And as we get to the end of our prepared questions, I want to begin inviting the audience to start sort of thinking about any questions that they might have for our panel. You can present your questions using the chat function, or by reserving it for the Q&A period, and just by raising your hand, and we'll call on you. So just on to our last question here. We've spoken a lot about the business case for EDI. Now, what if, let's say, we discover that EDI is in fact not good for the bottom line? Do we stop including diversely situated and identified folk? No, right, of course not. And so aside from the business case, why else do you think we care about equity and inclusion? And I see Catherine laughing, so maybe I'll go to Catherine first.
Well, I think it's been shown it does have a business case. It's been shown that organizations who have at least 30% women on their boards have a more rewarding financial situation, less risk is taken, things like that. So that's why I was laughing. And then I've been at several international gender summits, and there's a professor, I believe, from Norway, Kurt Rice, and he always says, because it's the right thing to do, to include everybody, give everybody a chance, and right the wrongs of the past as well too. So that's my answer.
Mamadou?
Yeah, I may add, I agree that there is a business case. I think there are many studies that show that EDI, considering EDI, has significant impact on any organization with respect to performance, with respect to productivity, etc. Even if we don't talk about this business case, what is EDI? You have this equity. What is equity? It's fairness. Do you know someone who is against fairness? No one. We will all agree that fairness is something very important. Just saying this equity, that may convince everyone. Because as human beings, I don't want to be treated unfairly. No one wants to be treated unfairly. Just saying that, you are going to convince many people that EDI is something that we need to consider. Business case, I will say, they are countless, because as scientists, we believe in data. There are many data that have proven that any organization, you have diverse people, diversity, gender diversity, ethnical diversity, sexual oriented diversity, your organization will be better in terms of reputation, in terms of productivity. And you need to consider also the young generation. The young generation, EDI is very important. A success of an organization, you need to attract talent. Attract talent will keep them. If you don't consider EDI in the approach of your organization, in the planning, that will be very difficult to attract talent. And without talent, whether you are at the university or in the private organization, without talent, you will not have success. Therefore, I think everyone would agree that EDI is very important. The challenge is just to convince people, because convincing people take time. Training takes time. Some people have been living for many years without considering EDI or saying EDI is not important, but it's continuous work. Try to convince people. I think with time, people will believe, people see that EDI is something very important, because there are countless facts that show that EDI is very important.
Kathy?
So I'm going to echo Catherine and Mamadou. All organizations want to attract the best and the brightest, right? And the best and the brightest come from every culture, every background, of course, gender equity as well. I mean, it's incredibly important. So we need to constantly find ways of reaching those diverse communities, and making sure that we are there and present, making sure that we create policies and programs that make sure that the individuals feel welcome and they belong at an organization. This is essential. You can't go against the fact that it makes good business sense, but as Marmaduke said, it's fairness, and it's incredibly important for all organizations to be fair and equitable in their hiring practices.
Thanks, Kathy. With that, we'll pivot here to audience questions, and I see that a couple have come in here. So from Wendy here in the chat, Wendy says that they're a strong believer of integrating a multidisciplinary outlook for every field in order for innovation to happen. There's a lot of organizations who are hesitant to bring in individuals who don't necessarily have all the traditional skill sets they're looking for. So Wendy's wondering, what are some strategies to help organizations pivot to this mindset of bringing more people with more diverse thoughts and backgrounds? And that's an industry sort of focused question. So maybe I'll go to Kathy first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we do have to talk about the fact that innovation comes from diversity, right? Diverse thought. So that fundamental thought will help, organizations pivot. So if we start with that main way of thinking, then we can bring people on board. I think that having programs in place, making sure that you have individuals that help drive those programs forward is essential. And that starts with your senior management team taking deliberate action on ED&I, right? And investing in the programs that are necessary to attract that diverse group of individuals.
Catherine or Mamadou, did you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I think Kathy has already addressed. I totally agree with her that innovation is critical for all organizations, and innovation can only come from diversity. People may have different perspectives of way of thinking. It's just try to show those organizations what is the benefit of having a diverse people in your organization. As I mentioned, everything is related to the training, to education. People who still have doubt that there is no benefit of having diversity, they don't have enough information to understand how important diversity is. If you look at now around the world, many organizations, high performance organizations, they have diversity in their organization. That how you can have creativity and how you can have innovation, and that you need to have people from different perspectives, have different way of seeing things. That how you can create something really positive, something very creative. I think just keep working, keep trying to explain people that diversity is your benefit. Diversity, you will gain a lot of having diverse people in your organization.
Any words on that question, Catherine?
Yeah, I think organizations have gotten to a point where everything is driven by, reduced budgets and no time. And so that's what happens with EDIs. It gets shortcutted in such times of stress and financial stress and other types of stress, time limitations. So some of the EDI resources we have suggest that you take time to make decisions, because when we make decisions quickly, we use shortcuts like the unconscious bias. And, we tend to take people who just like ourselves because we think it's going to go faster to work with people just like ourselves. So it's an investment really that organizations have to think, as Kathy said, to make a deliberate, conscious move to change the way you're doing things. And maybe it'll take extra time in the beginning, maybe not, but it'll be worth it. So I think the best way to get organizations to move is to show them examples that are quite surprising or quite different, where somebody coming from another culture or another group sparked an idea within the group. And I love these videos and a book by Lionel Laroche, who is a French chemical engineer who has an organization in Toronto helping immigrants settle in Canada in the technical professions, so engineers and scientists. And he has such interesting examples. And, you know, a lot of our companies are also have satellite offices in different countries, right? In Ukraine and India and China and dealing with North American cultures. There's such clashes between the cultures, and he explains the dynamics super well. And I think that those are worth looking into for organizations.
I'll do the next question in the chat here, then I'll go to you, Leonora, afterwards. So in general, the entry jobs and perhaps middle management is quite diverse in Canada. Any ideas on how to change the composition at the top executive levels? A lot of DEI supporters still have a very white middle-aged men boards. Again, I'll go to you, Kathy.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm nodding my head because there's no denying, I mean, that's what exists at Ross. And that is fundamentally because we were a family organization, and many of our senior leaders, actually most of them, with the exception of one, have been with our organization for many, many years and have moved up the ranks. What we are doing is we are developing our diverse employee base now, and giving them the training opportunities, really spending time to make sure that they're developing the skills to continue to exceed and develop at Ross. And I see other organizations doing, similar activities, and I think really recognizing different people for their different skill sets, right? We all have strengths, and I think recognizing those very diverse strengths makes a huge difference to developing those individuals and bringing them up through the ranks. So I'm very optimistic with the programs that I'm seeing at Ross, and I know that in the next few years we're going to see a huge difference at that senior leader level, and I'm excited with what's to come.
Catherine?
So I mentioned earlier about the number of women on boards and financial situations of companies, and I was just looking up to make sure I had the dates more or less right, but I think around 2014, the Ontario Securities Commission required companies registered with them to have some number of women on their boards, and if not, to explain why or what they were going to do about it. So that's one way of trying sort of legislation to try to get people to change or organizations to change. And I think a lot of companies are doing it on their own as well. There's organizations who will sort of give a gold standard to certain companies if they show that they're making moves in those directions. One of them is called Catalyst. And then companies on their own, my sponsor for my first chair was Pratt Whitney Canada. So they had asked me before my chair to start a women's leadership forum and initiative. And this continues to today, is 16 years later now, that they still have a very active community within the company, a lot of leadership events, leadership grooming, and it has changed. It has changed the composition of the upper executive workforce. And so, yeah, you have to have leaders who believe in it, and hopefully they're educating themselves when they go to other types of events like this one to try and find out why it would be to their benefit.
Anything to add, Mamadou?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if we look at the management level, you have less people of color at those positions. And for me, I'm optimistic. Change is coming, but it will take time until having a significant change at those levels. And try to identify people who are very competent, support them, and promote them. And again, I say everything will be based also on training, education, that people see benefit. Having people from diverse groups on management level also may bring more creativity, more innovation for organization. But change needs time, and change sometimes is very difficult, but keep working, keeping convincing people. I'm sure that we are going to get there.
Thanks. Leonard, go ahead. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, no problem. Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yeah, I want to acknowledge the team here for doing this research and sharing it with us. It's quite eye-opening. I'm actually originally from Malaysia, and I'm now based here in Austria. So as you can see, going through the experience of the different diversity here and inclusion, and I can tell that it's not very inclusive. And actually what sparks me to speak is that I think firstly, a comment that is, I'm actually saddened by the whole discussion because I'm hearing that we actually need to justify business case, you know, and perspective and this and that, and showing data to, you know, organizations or, you know, leaders to buy into DEI. Fundamentally, is actually about being human to another human being, regardless of our gender. You know, female or male are actually just physical body parts that humanity had used those labels to segregate the different kind of Homo sapiens, you know, in order to manage us. If we could just go back to the book Sapiens, right? And many philosophers had tried to explain on how we as human beings evolved to where we are today, right? And sadly, like right now we are in a discussion on how to teach human beings to be human beings again. So that's a comment that I like to make. And a question, like, yeah, what would be the more effective way, you know, to have, you know, these organizations or leaders or policymakers to buy into this without us like negotiating a business and having to convince them this is ridiculous.
That's a great question. Thanks, Leonard.
Thank
Any
you.
speakers on the panel?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I understand her perspective. I think if you say that it's that we have to make business case in order to be able to convince those leaders, but I understand what you are saying. But making also a business case, because what is important, you need to find a way to convince people. Whether I have to use business case or I have to use that we are all human beings. If I can convince you, I have done my job. My approach is to find a way to convince people, say, having diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important. Whether I have business case or say we are all human beings, does not matter. Convincing people is more important. I totally understand, but you see a leader who are leading an organization, it's very difficult to convince him that using human being argument, because this leader also has to be assessed at the end of the year. That's how the organization works. What is your productivity? What is your performance? How is it? If I don't use his approach to convince him, that will be very difficult for me to achieve my objective. For me, it's find a way to achieve my objective.
Right. The challenge is really between sort of striking a balance between, you know, resonating with people and communicating and bridging those gaps, and sort of still attending to the fundamental, you know, principles of human rights, as Leonard said, and social justice. And so thank you for those rich insights. Anything to add, Kathy or Catherine?
Well, I was going to say, and it's unfortunate, but we have ingrained biases, and it's something that we have to acknowledge, and then we have to learn from. Like, and if we don't take the steps to first acknowledge our biases and then say, okay, what can I do to change those? How can I be influenced? I mean, as individuals, as well as organizations, we really do have to take that time to do the training, the learning. I mean, you know, I as an individual have spent the last couple of years really trying to learn as much as I can about Indigenous communities, and you know, being raised principally in Canada, in our schools, the school systems, we know that we were the history was written by white men, and so we have to in a sense, undo some of that education that we were raised on. And we have to open our minds to other ways and other thoughts. And only when we do that will we really be open to achieving true diversity. So I acknowledge everything you're saying, and I think it's great, the comment that everything you say I agree with, but as humans, we are unfortunately conditioned in certain ways, and we have to acknowledge that conditioning and then move forward.
Thanks, Kathy. And I'll give the last word to Catherine.
Yeah, well, capitalism and philosophy courses is my answer. If we would have more integrated discussions or collaborations across disciplines, at least at the university and beyond in companies, more philosophical outlook, as you were talking about, I think things would be better. And I think the capitalism aspect is, it only gets worse as we go forward. I don't know how you can reverse that, but anyway, those are my short answers.
We have two additional questions from Isa and Lauren in the chat here that we won't have time to get to right now verbally, but I invite the panelists to continue engaging in the chat as we move to our sort of last component of the session today in the last few minutes. So I just want to say that our discussions today identified, right, the progress that we have made, but also how far we have to go in science and engineering, how much more work we have to do to close those gaps. So I invite the audience to again navigate to Menti, type in the code that'll appear on the screen momentarily, and share one thing that you took away from the session today. And again, this is completely anonymous and only takes a moment to navigate to. So the Menti link is in the chat, and the screen will appear momentarily. Again, the question is just, what did you take away from the session today? What are some sound bites or some key learning outcomes? Mariatu, did you want to cue the slides so folks can see what everybody has learned? Thank you. Recruiting is difficult. I'm seeing hope, humanity, change, acknowledging bias. I'm gonna give it a couple more seconds. There's room for change. Absolutely. Acknowledging that EDI fails. Absolutely as well. Seeing change in the middle there, educating youth. Yeah, awareness. Yeah, so education, of course, awareness. And so, I'm seeing sort of the theme of, there's room for change, both sort of in the status quo of our research and education spaces, but as well as within the EDI as a tool itself, right? There's room for growth and change within these principles themselves as a tool to drive these changes in the broader research and innovation and education spaces that we find ourselves in. Okay, so please now join me in thanking our panelists today, Kathy, Mamadou, and Catherine, for giving us their time and insights today. I'm also really grateful to you, our audience, for tuning in and participating. I will now return the floor to Monsieur le Doyen, Jacques Beauvais.
Merci, Michelle. Thank you very much. Our hope in the Faculty of Engineering is really to empower our community to be able to fulfill their academic and professional passions, to train and graduate global change makers who are going to seek to conduct work that's of public value, and in an environment, of course, that is diverse, welcoming, and inclusive for all. So I'm really thrilled to announce that starting this summer, we're going to have one vice dean in the executive team that will formally lead the EDI actions and strategy in the faculty. who's going to work with faculty leadership, with the students, with the faculty members and the staff. And I want to thank everyone once again for bringing to light what I hope are opportunities for the future and for participating to what was today, I think, a very fulsome discussion. We also want to thank OSPE, the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, for organizing NEM, National Engineering Month this year. Lastly, a very special thank you to all the National Engineering Month partners who are noted in the slides. My hope is that we will find more reasons to connect, to learn, and to grow as a community. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the afternoon today. Thank you.